Welcome to the Thinking Business podcast brought to you by Trowers and Hamlins. In this special series, we'll be exploring the latest challenges, opportunities and trends affecting businesses currently. We'll be speaking to a range of industry leaders and experts who will be sharing their insights and wisdom to help you navigate the changing landscape. My name's Danielle Ingham. I'm a partner in the Employment and Pensions team here at Trowers, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Anthony Webster. Anthony is Board Director for Career Legal, and he's one of the founders of DVF Recruitment. Anthony is a true leader in the space of equality, diversity and inclusion, and he's going to be talking to me today about the importance of EDI when it comes to recruitment and retention.
Great intro. Well, thanks for having me on board. And it's lovely to be here. Very small studio.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for joining us.
Well, brilliant. Thank you for having me.
It would be really great if you could start off with a little bit of background about yourself and how your passion for EDI came about.
Yeah, thank you. So I've been in recruitment for, I'd like to say 15 years, but I think it's more pushing to 17, 18 years. And I've worked in environments in recruitment, sometimes have been quite challenging. So sexuality, hiding that under the cover in a lot of firms where I've worked historically, and found that really, really challenging. So I think for me, being really authentic and who I am as an individual is so important. And I think I've been at leading DVF Recruitment and been at Career Legal now for 8 years, I can honestly say that's catapulted my career, just being completely myself. But I think also shining a lens on me as a leader, who I bring into the organisation, for me, that's just kind of massively impacted how well we have done as a culture. So that's definitely from my own personal experience and the challenges I've definitely had to face mentally, being in environments where I couldn't really be super authentic, which is so challenging. And I can resonate massively with people who go through that as well. I lead a lot of I co-lead with a brilliant lady called Michelle, all of our EDI initiatives. So we work with all of our clients internally and externally to just really help them on that journey. So where are they today, where they're looking to get to, but also just having some really honest conversations and just being quite open around. Don't always have to have big budgets, big spending. Sometimes a lot of the small things have massive impact as well. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. I've also worked really tirelessly within recruitment to try and change recruitment as an organisation just through what I've been through. So I'm one of the founding members of a business called Campaign, and we're the first LGBTQ plus organisation to really try and change the recruitment as an industry, because there's a lot of individuals that go through similar backgrounds that I have that probably struggle but actually go into recruitment and end up leaving. And that's really lost talent as well. So we're really trying to create a community where we start to work with a lot of recruitment businesses to just change how they are, make people feel a lot more inclusive. So that's a little snapshot of me.
Amazing. Well, you're going to have lots of tips to share for our audience. Yeah. So just taking a step back for a second, why do you think EDI is still really important when it comes to attracting and keeping great people?
I think it's fundamentally important now. So if we look at all the organisations that we work with globally, I think actually what's significantly changed, so when I've probably the last 5 years, last 10 years, last 15 years, a lot of individuals would leave because of package salary. So it's fundamental now that the question you get asked time and time again from probably 90% of candidates, what's the culture, how inclusive is the organisation? But even more than that, there's so much available now, ready available, where individuals and candidates can quite quickly work out how inclusive a business is. There's stats, there's ratios, there's social media. So I think it plays a really important part now that actually firms really authentically trying to be doing what they need to do authentically to be inclusive. But outside of that, it's also when attracting people to the organisation, but how do you hold on to them? Mm-hmm. And there's so much choice out there for individuals now that actually if they don't feel supported, we're just seeing time and time again that they're just going to other businesses. So I think it's shifted significantly in the last 5 years, where culture, well-being, benefits all play a significant part in decision making. And it's actually, I'd say that salary probably is secondary now in terms of package, which is a complete shift. Yeah. And we've done lots of studies, lots of polls, and it's the numbers are alarming, where actually it's just done a completely different shift. So it's so important. And I think decision making when you decide to leave is a big decision to start looking around, and culture and all those pieces are fundamentally important.
And do you find that candidates are actively asking questions about EDI at recruitment stage?
Yeah, early stages really. So I think probably not so much digging into kind of equity diversity piece, but I think first is culture. Wellbeing, how supported are they? But they will also go and do a bit of research themselves, speak to friends, and they'll come back again. So throughout the stages, we're having those conversations quite regularly as well. And again, it's really important that it's not just the shop front. So, there's a lot of businesses that will throw loads of money behind it, but quite quickly, individuals know the businesses that are doing authentically. They know under the ground how people are feeling again. And I think because of social media particularly as well, it's so much accessible now for people to find that out quite quickly.
Yeah.
So I think it is a really important part to play around leaders in organisations and layer by layer how we get that right. And we'll probably talk a bit more about that.
Yeah, definitely. I'm conscious we can't really have a conversation of this nature probably without talking about the change in the political arena, particularly from the US when it comes to roll back on certain EDI initiatives. Is that something that you're seeing more over here, or is that something that's a concern within the market? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's definitely we're hearing about it, and I work with obviously global organisations, a lot that are led by the US as well. So it's a mixture. I think within the UK and Europe, I think there's still a big positive impact, and actually let's just continue to do what we do because there's so much great work that's been done. But I think there is also the other end of the coin. There is some firms that are really stripping back quite quickly, completely eradicating what's been on their website, some of their policies, and they've done that with quite a lot of force, and that has sent quite a lot of a ripple across the marketplace. And I think there's a couple of things to take away from that. I think there's looking at the small marginalised groups of employees within those organisations that are really worried. And I've got friends that are trans, LGBTQ+. I've got a lot of friends, ethnic backgrounds as well, that are really kind of fearful of what that means to them. And again, if the organisations are stripping it back, is that a part of the values that I want to be and culture that I want to be a part of as well? So we're not seeing a big impact, particularly for the UK and Europe, but we're starting to see some of that movement, which is a little bit alarming because I think there's been so much great work that's been done probably over the last 3 to 4 years. And some of that stuff looks like we're kind of in reset mode, which is a little bit concerning.
Yeah, and these things, they do tend to be cyclical to a certain extent. Yeah. So I know that when we think about, as you say, values, authenticity, it is actually really important, isn't Completely. It, for employers to know what they stand for and really stand behind that message? Yeah,
and a lot of it has to be driven by, what are your values as a business? What's the strategy? And the values have to be underpinned by the strategy, right? So if that starts to change and shift, a lot of the teams quite quickly can work out if the investment's not been invested into training and the investment not into ED&I is going to get pulled. Quite quickly people can see that. And again, I think there's so much competition for choice. If you are a high flyer, you're doing well in an organisation, you're a top performer, you can get tapped up so quickly now. It's not just you working with 1 or 2 agencies like you would trust 10 years ago, 15 years ago. You've now got agencies, headhunters, internal TA teams. You've got LinkedIn, all of the resources to go and proactively find a job quite quickly as well. So your demand for talent's really high. So actually if people start to feel that way, then they're not going to hang around. So yeah, it's really important.
And actually more scope, like you said, to do their own digging about, is this employer really delivering what they're saying they're delivering in practice?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, there's a lot of said to, throwing weight behind it. And obviously part of getting ED right, there has to be some budget and spend and resources attached to it. But I am also a bit of a believer that in your heart, if you can actually do some of the small things layer by layer within on the ground, but all the way up to leadership level, you see the leaders get involved in the resource groups and the community. They play an active role in leading from the front. That's much more important for me than sometimes actually just throwing weight behind, we put investment behind it. It doesn't mean much when actually you break it down. So it's really important to get some of that stuff right. And I think people are so much more clued up with everything being pumped to them now quite quickly. And they won't hang around.
So for the businesses that do want to keep with their EDI strategies, the initiatives that maybe they've got in the planning or they've had for a few years, what are the biggest challenges that you see at the moment with either implementing new initiatives or keeping momentum behind what you already have?
Yeah, I think it's having sometimes the right resources to be able to do that. So I think resources is important. Understanding data. So a lot of firms don't know data, right? So they've not done a lot of surveys across the business. Probably not got enough buy-in for data. So when they do the surveys, they don't get the massive return on who's completed it because they feel like that's going to be shared and it's not private. So there's a lot of work on actually getting the data part right. And I think firms are really struggling to be able to kind of tackle that part. But then that's probably the end goal of getting data, but what you need to do before that. I think big challenges is keeping the momentum, getting leadership buy-in. So again, exec leadership buy-in from the top, but actually what's more important is you can get leader and exec buy-in, but actually layer by layer, management layer, have to have the right training, have the right tools. What's the recruitment process? Has that been changed? What is the benefit? So I think it's a combination of understanding the data, getting the right leadership and buy-in from all levels of leadership, but particularly at the exec. But I think what underpins all of that is having the right strategy in place that really looks at values and what do we stand for as a business, because you can have the right buy-in, but actually if there's not a real clear strategy that has ED&I underpinned in there, then it's not going to work.
Yeah, so it's kind of know what you're aiming for.
Yeah.
And focus on that rather than trying to cover too much too soon.
And I also think, completely. And I also think actually a lot of it's always big bang, isn't it? We need to get here. And actually I've worked with so many organisations that actually kind of 2 years where there was 2 years ago, they've made some quick wins and some marginal gains. And actually that's something also to be proud of and celebrated.
Yeah,
but also just talk about it, share it around with people, because again, that creates community, it creates buy-in. We've got internally, there's only 50 of us. We can change things quite quickly, but we rolled out, ED in our community that wanted some champions across all the different verticals. We had so many people bite our arm off for it, and that's volunteers. They've led initiatives themselves. So we've been able to change so much really quickly. Hasn't cost anything really. But again, I think there's always a fear of actually, we need to get all the way down this end of the road, but actually it's just sometimes start small, and actually some of the smaller things within 12 or 18 months can have a massive impact.
Brilliant. So you mentioned the groups and the champions. I'd love to know what other small wins you've seen work really well, whether that's in your organisation or others that you've worked with.
Yeah, I think again is working with employee resource groups, or creating if you don't have to have those, just leaning on some of the communities that you have around and the different teams on the ground. But I think looking at what's the calendar, what does it look like, planning ahead around what would be if we looked at 2026 starting January 1st, what would the end of 2026 look like? Like what could we achieve as a business? What would good look like? And that might be, we're going to look at our wellness and benefits because we haven't looked at them for a long time. Well, let's have a look at them, because so many of them have changed now. Within benefits, you can add so many little things that actually, again, also have impact to people. And that might be benefits. It might be, let's look at a calendar. We can't probably look at all the different events that's going up because there's a hell of a lot when you look at the calendar. Yeah. But actually, what are some of them that's really probably important and priority for us, and what can we be doing? What's some of the community stuff that we can be doing externally? What's some of the charity partners that we can be doing? That's a few things there. You can look at also what we've done is actually how do we attract people in the organisation? What's our interview process? Well, let's look at our recruitment cycle when it comes to ED. And do we need to mix that up a little bit more? Well, the CEO's always led with the first interviews. He's been doing them a certain way for 20 years. Well, is he probably the best person maybe to sit with some of the younger talent coming through? I'd say let's switch that in reverse a little bit and get some of those guys that are new into the organisation. So again, there's a lot of little things that you can do within the framework, I would say, that actually you can change quite quickly. That doesn't have to cost much, but does have massive impact in when you do a lot of little things. It actually adds a lot of weight as well.
And what do you think about the presence of things like role models and mentors? Have you seen that work well?
I think I've seen it work well in some of the smaller, medium-sized organisation, but again, doing it authentically and understanding, well, what's the purpose of us having mentorship programs? And mentorship programs are brilliant. I think particularly, I was an apprentice, so I never went to university. I was quite bold to just want to get out there, and I love any organisation that really wants to get the young talent coming through, because I think, again, since COVID, there's a bit of a gap of actually a lot of the younger people, future workforce coming through. So I think apprenticeship mentoring programs are brilliant. Again, if you can get them done. If it's done where it takes up a lot of time and it's not the right individuals that really want to get involved in it, I think then that's where it tends to break down. So I think it's authentically finding the right people that really want to be part of it. They're potentially not doing it because that's part of the development framework on a
Yeah.
performance management, which again we see, and actually people doing it because they genuinely care and want businesses to win, and that's where you tend to get the better results.
Yeah. So flowing from that, obviously there is a feeling sometimes, isn't there, that EDI can be focused too much on compliance rather than because it's there to promote genuine inclusion.
Yeah.
So would you be able to share your thoughts on that and what businesses can do to avoid falling into that trap?
Yeah, I think, again, getting champions that's outside of within that team. So again, finding the right stakeholders within the business to really help influence and drive that, because I think when it's led sometimes within compliance or feels like it's compliance heavy, people tend to switch off. If they're not within that, I think culturally you don't always get the people want to jump and raise their arm to support and drive it all forward. So I think get the right buy-in. I think bring other stakeholders in across the business, but also have it impactful led in terms of what the purpose is and what is the purpose, what we're trying to achieve. And not sometimes being dragged into a lot of the frameworks and the regulatory piece, and also make it sometimes a little bit fun. You know, you can do a lot of things that, you know, take the sting out of when you mention compliance and stuff, where people are like, oh, are we doing something because we have to tick the box? Whereas actually we're not doing it to tick the box. This is the reason why, and this is the what we're trying to achieve as a business.
Yeah. And when it comes to something like data, for example, that could be seen as this is quite dry and it's about statistics. You mentioned obviously telling great stories with that data and sharing the information, really celebrating what you've got. Yeah,
and that's it, isn't it? I think it's when people start thinking about this, oh, what data do I have to share? Why do I have to share it? Well, actually, just strip it back. It's if you celebrate some of the successes, understand the reasons why we're collating this stuff and actually really vocalising it. But I think we've not probably mentioned massively on communication. I think so many firms probably get the communication part wrong. So a lot of changes happen within businesses. They're going through a lot of change, particularly at the moment where there's just so much pressures within organisations. Changes happen and they need to happen, but how it's communicated and the regular communication at all levels, I think is super important. And I think really impactful, positive ED&I programs is that they really get communication bang on at all levels, and it's consistent and the messaging's really clear. And then that obviously leads to better results as well.
Yeah, the communication, I think there's probably a range of different things that you see out there. Because different sizes of organisation, different types of organisation. But would you say it is really about the consistency, like you mentioned, but being authentic about what you're saying?
Yeah, being authentic as well, because I think, and we're probably saying this for a hell of a lot on this session, but I think you can do consistent communication, and again, you can do great brand and it looks sexy, but is it appealing to that audience, right? I think we've noticed that young people, most that want to work for tech firms now, I think it's a ridiculous 89% are only attracted to working in tech. But it's not that professional services, law firms, insurers, I work with all these businesses, they're doing some incredible, exciting projects, but the young people don't know about it. So it's actually how are you appealing to the audience, and the marketing piece is really important. Actually, are you speaking to that audience? Are you on the right platforms? What's the messages that are coming across? So again, it's just sometimes thinking about shifting the dial a little bit and not doing probably what we've been doing it the same way, because so much has changed in the last 5 years at a massive rapid pace, particularly when you look at AI and a lot of the new technologies out there. So I think businesses just have to adapt to some of those changes, and also not be afraid to just rip up the rule book and try something different. Yeah,
and get feedback presumably from younger people coming in. What attracted you? What do you think we could do better?
Yeah, but also videos. Getting those integrated in the organisation. There was one firm that I've worked with did a really good job. He's I think a grad that's been in the organisation 12 months. Really great character, and he's done like a walk through the floor. A really great video, and I see the video, and I kind of watched it 2 or 3 times. I said if there was a young person watching it, they would be super drawn into just this snappy 60-second video, and that's something that can easily be done. That again has massive impact as well, particularly if you're going to try to get future leaders within that are coming through as well.
We've talked a little bit about leaders, haven't we? And getting involved in the initiatives, doing it in a genuine, authentic way. What role do you think leaders should be taking moving forwards?
I think being adaptable. So I think being open to, outside of the stuff that we mentioned, I think is being adaptable, being open to learning. And I think sometimes leaders in organisations have been doing it a long time. So they've sometimes been doing things a certain way, being open to change and really listening on the ground to what's going on. learning, putting people through training, the development, learning development, but I think also being open to looking at kind of layers underneath the management team as well. But I think it's really important that as a leader, and I've got a fantastic team, but I think it's also being visible, being on the ground, listening, hearing, asking the right questions, but also being open to take feedback as well. And sometimes
not be afraid.
Not being afraid to listen, to hold a bit of a mirror up and, find out what's going on and stuff, because people really want to see, particularly leadership roles now, it's so fundamentally important that people on the ground, doesn't matter how senior or how big the organisation is, if they see you're visible, your communication style's really authentic and genuine, that's what's important and that's what sets you aside. So I think leaders of today have a really important role to just hold a bit of a mirror up and look at, what's working well, what are they doing, but also not being afraid to just change things if they need to.
And presumably what can they delegate to
Completely.
people who can do things in the more modern, forward-thinking way?
And bringing in the right people and being, creating the right resource groups and champions as well, but being part of it, right? So it's about delegating, but I think if you're truly trying to get the culture and that part right, you also do need to be as visible as you can be, as whilst bringing in the right people.
Yeah, absolutely. So looking forward, what types of trends, if you can call it trends, what type of trends do you think we're going to see coming through in EDI, or what we've already, seen changing over the last couple of years? Yeah,
I'd say there's a big focus and shift from, ED&I, but actually equity being a big plan, probably a massive part in everything now. So actually, how fair the organisation is, looking at, the pay, looking at scales, looking at the equity piece. When people are coming through the organisation, have they got the fairest chance? Do they need extra support? So I think there's been a real big shift of organisations trying to really look at the equity part, right? Well, actually, if you get that part right, then that also creates a real strong ripple effect of a lot of the successful change as well. So that's been really important. Data, like we mentioned, of understanding the data, or actually where do we even start? We don't have to know it all, but actually what have we got so far? A lot of large size organisations have got real poor data, and that's they've been invested in data programs for 5 and 7 years and still struggle with it as well. So there's a big focus on data. I think also looking at wellbeing. So I think looking at ED&I, but actually well-being and benefits and policies is playing a big part in actually, what's worked historically, but actually have we had a look at them? Let's put that as a specific project to now look at, can we make some changes? Talent and retention. So again, looking at, the recruitment cycle that we've had, what has worked well, what are our lessons learned over the last 3 years, and what do we now need to start to shift? But some of those are some of the trends, and I'm just hoping that the momentum continues, over the next kind of 12 months, 18 months, but firms don't start to kind of panic and look at things outside and really focus on what's important, what their values are, and still keep that momentum, because time and time again, the results speak for themselves. The financial results speak to themselves when you have a diverse work culture, and that's the simple message. And actually, you have to hold on to that and think about that, rather than sometimes getting a little bit distracted by the noise.
Yeah, on the benefits side and the well-being, and organisations that maybe are not quite where they want to be on that. You mentioned that there's quite a lot of things that can be done to adapt and suit different types of people coming into the workplace. So I wonder if you can just give us some ideas.
I think again, it's like, one of the firms I do a lot of work with, it's something as simple as they support lunches. So what they was, trying to create a bit of an environment where we give you the flexibility to support. We don't mind you working from home, but we really want to try and get some of the senior guys visible, because we're going to get a lot of the younger talent coming through, which I think has been brilliant. But actually, younger talent coming through do sometimes need that FaceTime, but actually they've offered free lunches, and I think it's just it, or they partnered with one of the firms that they can actually get free lunches, but actually there is a cost attached to it completely, but actually it's not a significant cost, but actually has been really one of the small things that they've changed that's had a lot more impact on the office culture, because people have come in, if that makes sense. So that's what's one of the little things. Also, again, when you're looking at benefits and well-being, what are some of the other support with partners that you can do that give some of the, might be counselling sessions or some of the free advice that you might need when you're feeling a certain way mentally as well. So looking at mental health and well-being and working with some of those trusted partners to add some of those bits in, because historic, where I've worked as well, people have really used some of those services and actually, again, don't have to cost big bang, because there's a lot of really good firms that can offer some of those real good support. So I think just where a lot of stuff shifted, a lot of sometimes of those rewards and benefits haven't really been massively looked at. So I think, again, it's just saying, well, what are some of the ones that we want to keep? But is there anything that we can be doing? Vouchers, training, different other bits that we can be doing that have evolved that we want to start to kind of implement, right? And you could do it for 2 years and then actually we've tried it, it's worked, let's pivot, let's keep this, let's look at it again. I think it's just not being afraid to listen as well. You could do a survey across the firm, understand how people are feeling. Also ask one of the questions on there, if there was additional benefits that we were looking at, what would it like to be? And you'll be surprised that actually there'll be quite a lot of stuff that would come up that actually you could implement that actually won't cost much as well.
Yeah. Ask the question.
Yeah, ask the question.
Ask the question and get the answers.
But a lot
from
of people
the people
don't want to ask the question because they don't want the answers to come back. But actually, you're better to ask. And actually, if it means you've got to change you're going to get a lot of feedback. And it might be that actually, as a leader, you might have to swallow your pride a little bit to say, God, we're starting here and we've got a lot of work to do. But actually, you're better to start at that point, because you might say, well, actually, in 12 months' time, we can probably implement quite a bit here. And actually would be a lot more further ahead. So not being afraid just to take a step back and not be afraid to just asking what people are feeling in the organisation.
You mentioned workplace culture and the office culture.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask a question just following on from that around what are you seeing in terms of candidates, the inclusion piece around, do you want to work in the office? Do you want to work at home? How, for businesses that can offer hybrid working, how do you make sure that everybody still feels supported and included in that sort of model?
It's a really good question, and I'd love to be Rain Man, because I think, again, there's so many different examples. I think the dial has shifted, hasn't it, slightly, with more FaceTime, particularly London and the main cities, where a lot of organisations do want to be a little bit more visible. And then there's some firms we work with that are fully remote. The fully remote firms have created a culture where that's working for them, and they're bringing in individuals that really can work in that way. And then there's some firms that we work with that actually do want that more FaceTime, because they've really probably missed out on some of the young talent come through. And that's why I mentioned to you, I think for me, I do a lot of stuff with charity just in my own time, and I think I really believe a lot of young people are super, super talented, and firms are really missing out on opportunities and getting those individuals back in, particularly from COVID, because that has dropped off. So I think actually getting individuals coming through the door, your future workforce, where they will stay in for the next 5 or 7 to 10 years, but they also do need to come in, have a lot more structure. I've got quite a few young guys that might be listening to this, which is great. But I know significantly where they get a couple of days from home, but actually the days that they're in, that they're listening, they're hearing, they're soaking up, they're sitting with different teams, that you can't beat that. You can't beat that as firms. And I think there's just striking that right balance, that actually, if you're looking at the workforce for the future, you really have to also bringing in that young talent coming through. So creating the right balance is really important as well.
Great. I wanted to sort of finish off by talking about some of the training and education, because I think that's really important, isn't it, when it comes to EDI, making sure that everybody knows what we're talking about and what we're hoping to achieve as a business. Again, have you seen things that work particularly well, or that candidates say to you it's great that they have this, for example?
I think training and development is huge, but I think having an investment, and a real strong investment, that when you can come on board, if there is training and courses you want to be supported by, that comes with, if you're coming on board to do the course, then it has to come with some caveats, because it does cost. But I think firms that really are driving that forward and value that is really, really been quite successful for candidates attracted to businesses. But I think, again, rolling out, there's a lot of free courses through LinkedIn that you can do. There's all of our guys done unconscious bias training that had massive impact of just guys on the ground asking better questions, listening, listening and just not being afraid to kind of challenge and stuff. But I think, again, when it comes down to all of the different layers within equity and diversity, not being afraid to just partner with some of the charities that can come in and do workshops for the day to train everyone in a slightly different way. And again, a lot of this stuff doesn't cost, but you just have to really be up for the challenge and know that continuous learning and development through all layers of leadership and on the ground is so important.
Yeah. Okay, so Anne, you mentioned around the recruitment process and attracting talent into businesses. What trends or what new strategies have you seen coming through on the recruitment, the process side?
Yeah, there's been some really positive changes, I think, to the process. I think we've got a lot of clients now really taking a strong unconscious bias approach, so removing all details off CVs, where that might be universities, names, details. So really giving us, a fair chance for every profile that comes on the desk. That's been really positive. I think having a look at the interview process that I mentioned earlier, and again, not being afraid to completely shake that up and actually having a real diverse panel throughout each stage, but not being afraid to bring some of the more junior guys that have come on board to share a different perspective as well, which has been good. But I think outside of that, again, when we're looking at branding, when you're going through quite a good recruitment campaign, could you do a video? Could you just add something into that which just goes beyond sharing a job spec and what you've normally done again? So actually really incorporating the content and marketing piece, which I think's really had a quite a successful part in a lot of firms doing that quite well as well. So there's just quite a few different things that you can do on the ground within the actual recruitment cycle that actually will just change the outcome of what you're looking to get to and what you're looking to achieve, and has a positive impact. There are obviously some of the other stories on the other side that actually you definitely want to avoid, which is trying to find X because I need to kind of fill the plug and play and for the numbers, right? So again, is just getting that authenticity part right, but not being afraid just to change some of those smaller things that actually will definitely help.
And have you seen many businesses encouraging different ways to apply for roles, for example, to encourage people who might be neurodiverse or who
Completely.
might have similar issues to put themselves forward for things they might not otherwise?
Yeah, again, and it's a really good question. I think, again, is looking at, they're changing the way job specs are written, right? So it appeals to, a different, all walks of life. And I think that's been different. But I think when you're looking at the recruitment process is really asking and partnering with the right recruitment businesses to ask the right question, what support they might need, but really holding their hand through that process, but making sure that they look at all the different layers to that as well, which is important.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time, Ant.
Thanks for having me.
Loads of great practical tips, lots of key takeaways for businesses of all shapes and sizes. So I would like to say thank you. That's a wrap on this episode of the Thinking Business podcast. I would love it if you could join us on one of our future sessions. So stay tuned for the next podcast. And thanks, everybody.